This is embarrassing when it's your husband. Undaunted by the challenge to condense 1,000 years of history into an hour. Bill Stevenson is back today for part 3 of the history.
Thanks, everybody, for coming this morning. Can you hear me okay? I'm mic'd. History of Christianity, part 3. So starting with the Reformation and division of various Christian factions and expansion. And my epigraph, this is a new word, epigraph. I learned that this week from Word of the Day, popular computer. So this is my epigraph. For we walk by faith, not by sight, from Paul, 2 Corinthians. And I don't know, that just sort of speaks to me. If I took an epigraph of my father, it would be a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Just to say that to be quite a bit. Happy St. Patrick's Day. You see a lot of green out there. This is a perfect day to talk about the Reformation. Okay, so well, before I go, just a word of prayer. Dear Lord, so much has happened in the 2,000 years since you have been among us. Much has changed, but two things remain. One is your steadfast love for us and our enduring love and our enduring faith in you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we did, the first part was basically the Roman Empire. Second part was basically the Middle Ages, and the third part now the Reformation and beyond. And as before, the content is abridged, absolutely plagiarized and somewhat mangled. There's different points of view, so just have to go with that, go with a little bit of faith. And before we start, our confession of sorts. Okay, so history, like news headlines, tends to focus on the big stories, right? Involving powerful people and major events. Oftentimes the news is not good news. But behind the story are thousands, millions of everyday interactions among people that don't make the news real. And this is especially true with the story of Christianity. This focus has been on the emperors, bishops, popes, and empires, tribes, and councils. What we have not explored is the love, kindness, care, and compassion among ordinary people that Christianity nurtured. These stories did not make the headlines. I really haven't talked about them. But those little stories of love are the real story of Christianity, in my view, and the reason for its global success. Summary part 1, so bear with me, I'll do this very quickly, but I just thought it would make sense. I'm not sure if you all have been here for the other sessions. So Jesus of Nazareth was crucified in 30 AD. Apostles witnessed the resurrected Jesus. And that, I said before, is where we can stop. Basically, that's the story. Paul witnesses Christ, his transformation. Paul leads conversion of the pagans, huge. Pagans were 93% of the Roman Empire, so that expanded Christianity. An exponential growth of Christianity, sort of unexplained in a way. Rome's always behind the curve, fails to crush Christianity. Christianity grows. The Emperor Constantine endorses Christianity for various reasons. He became a Christian, but he also saw in Christianity the ability to unite his empire. He was very much into that. Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea. Jesus is God, it is established. Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire under Theodosius I. Huge. And the Council of Constantinople confirms the Trinity as official in 381. So that's sort of the first part. And sorry, part 2, bear with, this is even longer. And you can't read it, so I apologize. There's a lot of stuff that happened, so I tried to squeeze it into one page. The Council of Chalcedon confirms Christ as fully human and fully divine. So by 451, we have the basic tenets of Christianity that we practice today. Rome falls, but the Eastern Roman Empire remains intact. In 476, remember the barbarians come. The Benedictine order and monasticism develops in the 500s. The papacy is very strong. The Pope becomes the acting ruler of Rome and the speaker for Christianity, Western Christianity anyway. Then Islam conquers most of the Middle East and North Africa, threatens Constantinople, Mohammed. The Pope develops a relationship with Charlemagne. He says he kind of ditches the Eastern Empire and aligns with the largest political body in Western Europe. The Vikings come down, create havoc. Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Church split in 1054, the Great Schism. First Crusade launched, not our greatest moment. St. Thomas Aquinas, the existing God is an article of faith. I think that's sort of a basic theme. The papacy attains supreme power. Monasticism provides a solid foundation. This is the heyday of the Middle Ages, 1300. And then we have a downer, the plague, bad. Third of the population wiped out. Renaissance begins, so it's down, up. Renaissance begins and spreads, and then Constantinople falls to the Muslim Ottomans in 1453. And basically, the Eastern Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, and Constantinople. Basically that was the essence of the Roman Empire. That was the strength of it, and it just disappears because the Muslims take over. The Pope is all powerful in the 1400s, but voices of dissent emerge. So the whole power corrupts thing, right? 1500. Roman Catholic Church is the largest landowner in Europe by 1500. The Roman Catholic Church is the wealthiest institution in Europe. They sell stuff, they got tithes and taxes for one thing, then they sell relics, indulgences, church positions, you name it, tours. The Pope is the undisputed head of the church. He has an army. The Pope is an army. He declares war occasionally. He has his own states. He has concubines. He has children. Other signs of excess, nepotism, murder, bribery. Things need to be straightened out, basically. We need some reformation. And the Pope commands a formidable institution. He's supported by cardinals, archbishops. He has a chain of command. The hierarchy is bolstered by a system of monasteries, priests, etc. This is exactly the system that Constantine wanted, because remember the whole issue he had with the definition of Jesus as Jesus God. What Constantine would like to have done is call the Pope up and say, "Hey, Pope, let's settle this issue. You tell the archbishops and tell the bishops and tell the cardinals and so forth," but instead they had to have a ecumenical council instead. Succession issues could be complicated. However, remember the whole thing with the papacy in France or Popes at the same time, very messy. Okay, so similar challengers. I talked about this last time. I've been talking about the Waldensians. That was led by Peter Waldo. They led lives of poverty. And they're outside the Catholic hierarchy, so they're excommunicated, but not killed. Wycliffe challenged transubstantiation, holds the Bible as the highest source of truth, not the Pope. He's a heretic. He survived. He died of a stroke, but they dug up his remains and burned them. John Huss of Bohemia attacks corruption authority. He is less lucky. He was declared a heretic and he was burned at the stake in 1415. So just like the Roman Empire, the papacy is very sensitive to challenges to its authority. People in power don't like to have their power challenged. And now it's time the Pope decides for a capital campaign. Basilica at St. Peter's was in desperate need of repair. Leo X thought, I'll tell you what, let's sell some indulgences. What in the world is an indulgence? Well, for a very reasonable price, you get a document which provides forgiveness of sins, gets you into heaven from purgatory fast, satisfaction guaranteed. And wait, there's more, but you gotta act fast. A Dominican prior named Johannes Tetzel was the chief salesman. His slogan: as soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs. It rhymes like that in German as well. It's the faith you can trust. Here, you gotta buy it. That's Johannes. Step right up, we're saddling, we're going fast, Martin Luther, I got a hammer. Martin Luther, an Augustine friar and doctor of theology, takes exception to this fundraising efforts by the local archbishops. He doesn't like the indulgences. It's a step too far. Famously, Luther decides to express his dissatisfaction by nailing his theses on the church door in Wittenberg. But Luther is not trying to start a new church. He doesn't know what he's doing here. He is starting a big movement. He just wants the church to reform itself. Come on, guys. Let's stop the excesses. And there he is, nailing the theses on the door. And he has a song to sing, Martin Luther. As as he gets more support and he starts thinking about this more, he develops his positions. It should be scripture alone as the sole authority for the church. Rejects the absolute authority of the Pope. Pope's not gonna like this. Faith alone, not good works, is the key to salvation. Salvation is possible only through God's grace, which is free. So we all know that they're the basic tenets of our Reform movement. In addition, Luther translates the Bible in the German in spare time. Actually, he's in prison when he does that. Not in prison, he's hiding out. He acknowledges only 2 sacraments, not 7, 2, Lord's Supper and baptism. There were 7 in the Catholic Church, it still are. Disavows monasticism and celibacy. He marries. He should, yes, good idea. And sees the state and church as parallel but separate entities, distancing himself from the state. Anyway, the emperor, who's aligned with the Pope, says, let's talk. So Luther has to face the diet of worms. Yuck. So it's Diet von Worms in German, but that's how it looks. Luther famously states, here I stand, I could do no more in front of the emperor. The emperor and his electors gather and they decide that Luther is a heretic and should be condemned to death. But Luther has something that Hus did not have. He has protection. A guy named Frederick the Wise, who's a devout Catholic, supports Luther. And after Luther leaves Worms, lets him hide out in his castle. There's also social media, so Luther is able to print his opinions because of Gutenberg's press. And there's a mass market for cheap pamphlets. So everybody can get it. There's also just increasing distrust in Northern Europe for the Catholic Church. There's like a rise of nationalism. The stronger secular powers in the states are getting stronger. So the papacy is actually weakening at this point. So it's a good time to stand up to the Pope. And there he is. Look, he is a solid-looking guy. Bill Witt said one time that he had that Martin Luther was known for his joy of life too, and he had a beer stein that had marks in it: the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. The man enjoyed life. You know who this guy is? Who is this dude? It's Zwingli. Get into the swing of things. Zwingli of Zurich. 1519. He's sort of forgotten these days, but he was at the beginning of Reformation, he was a big voice. Zwingli claims to have independently developed a criticism of the church, much like Luther's. Great minds think alike. Zwingli's ideas and works were well received and quickly spread. Wouldn't it make sense to have Luther and Zwingli unite? So if you're going to have these challenging voices, wouldn't it make more sense to have them all come together so they can powerfully contain the church? So of course, the meeting is arranged between Luther and Zwingli. However, there's a clash of those, and they can't agree on bread. Is this my body or is it not really my body? So they have other issues too, but they don't get along, so there's no unification at that time. Zwingli shortly thereafter killed fighting Catholics. Other attempts at Protestant unity fail. So what's going on? Once you develop your opinion and others their opinions, maybe you can't get along. But we have this guy coming in, and you do recognize him, right? It stays a little bit squished because I had to bring it into Islam. Calvin, John Calvin, or Calvin and the Monks, 1549. John Calvin, Leslie Jean Calvin, something like that, maybe.
I don't recognize the spelling of that first one.
He's a lawyer. He comes to Geneva, so I think you all know this, right? And Calvin writes his very highly influential Institutes of Christian Religion. Calvin calls for Protestant reconciliation. It makes sense. The Swiss Protestants do reconcile. However, the Lutherans and Swiss Protestants cannot agree on predestination, among other things. Meanwhile, as they're trying to get the Protestant movement together as a force to confront the Pope, there's a radical fringe group that emerges. They're independent, uncompromising, fearless, and despised by everybody. The Lutherans, Calvinists, everybody hates these people. Mennonites. Everybody hates the Mennonites. Why do they hate the Mennonites? The Anabaptist meaning adult baptism. Actually, it means again baptized, and that was something that was used against them as a heresy, that they had two baptisms. It's punishable by death. But they believe in adult baptism, basically the forerunner of Baptists. They're started in Switzerland, and they desire to live their lives straight out of the New Testament, as pure as can be. No loyalty oaths, no military service, pacifist, common ownership of property, which still exists in one sect called the Hutterites in Western US and Canada. They have a communist form of property share. Loyalty only to God and Scripture. Political authority does not apply. You can talk to us, but we're not listening. We're going to listen to God. Even the Protestants are not pleased with this. Finley persecutes the Anabaptists. He needs them. He needs people to obey him because he has things to do, like fight the Catholics. As the Anabaptists practice pacifism, adult baptism, these particularly pacifism and adult baptism are very influential for the future for all churches. They're punished by just Anabaptists being drowned for the beliefs. This is what Zwingli did to them because they believe in adult baptism. Okay, you're not obeying me, we're gonna kill you. But they survived, and there's an Amish buggy. You can see these now. I'm from Pennsylvania, and there's Amish in the northern part of the county, and you'll see little signs there that have a little buggy on them. Warning, buggy ahead. And they have to obey the laws and have a little warning thing in the back. They're still do it. Pretty amazing. Meanwhile, in England, King Henry VIII has girl problems. King Henry, take my wife, please. Before, to curry favor with the Pope, when Luther came out, Henry wrote this piece called, it wasn't called Why I Like the Seven Sacraments, but it was about the seven sacraments and why they're a good thing. And the Pope gives him the title Defender of the Faith, which is still used today for the monarchy in England. But Henry decides he needs to ditch his wife, Catherine Aragon, because he's not produced a male heir. You know the story, I'm sure. So he tries the old annulment scheme, meaning that, well, she had been married to my brother, Arthur, and therefore she can't marry me really, so our marriage really wasn't valid, therefore it should be annulled. The Pope says, no. Henry decides to create his own church. He's advised, why don't you set up your own church? He does that. And he has his marriage annulled by his new, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and helps himself to the Catholic. This is a brilliant plan. He not only gets what he wants, he gets the marriage annulled, but he gets all of the Catholic land in England. Brilliant. And he starts a new church, the Church of England, Anglicanism. So Christianity in 1533. Okay, so despite the Reformation, the Roman Catholic Church is still the primary church in Italy and Spain, France, Portugal, Ireland, except for the northern bit. You know about that, Northern Ireland. East, a lot of the Slavs, Poland, writ large, I call it, and the South and Eastern Germany, Bavaria, and places like that. The Reformed churches are growing in parts of Switzerland, France, the Huguenots, the Netherlands, and most famously, Scotland. Lutheranism was growing in the north and east of Germany. And Anglicanism we just talked about, established by England by decree. And Anabaptists, they're really not enforced, they're scattered here. Crush the heretics. Okay, the Catholic Church decides that, and the Holy Roman Empire together decide to attack the Protestant states. On the principle that all Protestants, by definition, are heretics, and therefore should all be killed. A peace finally is agreed to in 1555, in which Lutheranism is recognized, and the principles established. Calvinists are still heretics. So John Calvin and his followers, the Presbyterians, they're all heretics. Lutheranism is okay, and it is established through the peace principle of curios regio eos religio. Let the prince decide religion. So the prince, whoever's in charge, can say, okay, we're Protestant, or we're Lutheran, or we're Catholic. And this happened a lot in the Holy Roman Empire in Germany. And some of the princes were Lutheran, and they converted to Catholicism, then they converted to Lutheranism. So all the subjects did as well. So if I do it, prince do it, you've got to do it. That's how it's done. not conscience, but I tell you, the Huguenots have a big support in France. And in fact, when Henry IV becomes king, he's a Huguenot. He becomes king, but he decides to become Catholic. And decides to make Catholicism the official religion of France while tolerating the Huguenots. Why is that? Because it was politically expedient for him to do so, because there's more Catholics in France. He could unite the country better if he converted to Catholicism. So that's a matter of conscience for you. So this is a hard map to follow, I'm sure, but you can see it's a mess, right? You got, the green is Catholic, you got the Lutherans in northern Germany, Scandinavia, you got England doing their own thing, you got the Scots doing Presbyterianism, you got a mixture of Orthodox and around Greece. You can see Greece is, right? You know where these countries are, I'm sure. I just want to point out, here's the whole Roman Empire, which is a mess, right? All these little principalities and so forth fighting each other, and it's not really an empire, as I mentioned before, I think in the previous. It's not holy, it's not Roman, it's not an empire. This is kind of a conglomeration, but just to show you how complicated the political situation was, which meant the religious situation was complicated. War is over if you want it. Apparently not. So what happened between 1618 and 1648? During this period, Catholicism regained much of its lost territory because the princes could decide, and there were tiny wars. But then in 1618, several Catholic representatives are in Prague, and they're discussing matters, and they get tossed out by some Protestants. I forget what caused the outrage, but they were thrown out the window. They were thrown out the window. And they landed, according to some, into a dung heap, and they survived. That's true. It's called the defenestration. It's fairly famous. They survived, but the incident sparked a 30 Years' War between the Protestant and Catholic states. This is what I talk about the headlines. The headlines are bad, right? Catholic France sides with the Protestants. Catholic France sides with the Protestants. I mean, how cynical is that? After 30 years of war, a third of Germans were killed, it is estimated. It was awful. Finally, peace in 1648 recognizes both Lutheranism and Calvinism, along with, of course, Catholicism, but not the Anabaptists. Shown this. So that's why I ended up in Pennsylvania. The British Isles. Scotland, there's conflicts between the Catholics. Mary Queen of Scots is Catholic, and a lot of French sympathizers because they wanted to fight the English. And anyway, the Calvinists prevail, and John Knox becomes head of the church in Scotland. Go Presbyterians! England. Tension between Charles I and the Puritans results in English Civil War. Probably to remember Oliver Cromwell and all that. Parliament wins, and we have a monarchy and Anglicanism restored in 1660. But the Puritan Revolution spawns new Christian sects in England: Congregationalists, Baptists, Quakers, in addition to Puritans. So you have this splintering now of Protestantism occurring. And there's a map. I think it's going to be our last map. I like maps, but maybe you don't. I don't know. But you can see how this is sorted out now. Most of Europe remains Catholic. That's the green bit. You can see England's little thing. They have some Catholics, but it's Church of England. Scotland's Presbyterian. You have in the blue bit you have Reformed Church going down the Rhine towards Netherlands, and then Lutheranism is the yellow bit. Ottoman Empire has encroached its way into Europe. I think we talked about that before. Russia is Orthodox. Oh, and by the way, speaking of the whatever happened to remember the Eastern Orthodox Church? Whatever happened to them? They used to be the church. We last saw them in 1453 when the Turks conquered Constantinople. So all the land that had been previously the heart of the Roman Empire, the heart of Christianity in North Africa and the Middle East, is all now Islamic. All the Eastern Roman Empire is Muslim, by the way, I just said that. The Ottoman Turks take over Greece and the Balkans and besiege Vienna, all the way in Austria. Unsuccessfully, they leave in 1683, but they left behind coffee. So when the Viennese came out and they saw this, so what is this stuff? And they drank it. This is pretty good. So if you've ever been to Vienna, but they're famous for their coffee houses. Thank you, Turks. And the Ottomans allow Eastern Orthodox to practice Christianity. Many do convert to Islam anyway because they don't have to pay the tax set. Money thing. Greece does not win its independence until the 19th century, until the 1820s. Lord Byron had something to do with that. The Orthodox Church becomes firmly established in Russia, which remained beyond the control of the Turks. So Moscow deems itself, or was deemed, the Third Rome. Anyway, we're leaving Europe now. By Europe, we must come back to you. To review, East Roman Empire in the East, hands of Islam. Western Europe is the bastion of Christianity. The Catholic Church becomes an extremely powerful institution directing the lives of people in society. The Protestant movement unleashes forces of individual conscience, freedom of choice, equality, and demand for toleration. So without the Reformation, you might argue, then you have no Enlightenment, age of reason, you have no the progress that we've had as a Western civilization without the Reformation, one could argue. Now, the Europeans, I think it's pretty clear, the Europeans have been fighting each other a lot, right, it's like day one. And every increment, the military technology gets better and better. You know, you go from bows and arrows, so yeah, there's rough guns and better guns and armor. And they're developing all this military technology and warships, ships that can sail around with cannons and so forth. They're doing this kind of little bit different than other continents. Land ho. Christopher Columbus stumbles upon 16 million square miles of land. It was a mistake, but 16 million square miles, South America and North America. These people, their military technology is bows and arrows and spears. What's going to happen? They aren't Christians yet. Spread of Christianity, so starting with South America. So Spain claims all of the Americas, but the Pope wants to broker a peace between Portugal, which is strong at that time. And so they divide South America into two. That's why Brazil speaks Portuguese, you remember, and why the rest of South America is speaking Spanish, because of the Pope. That was the deal. All Roman Catholic, of course. Spread of Christianity, indigenous population. In Spanish America, the Pope says, well, to Spain, well, you do whatever you want to. You're going to appoint all the bishops and so forth. It's going to be hands off. We'll have a perspective, it's hands off. So the Spanish decide that it makes sense that all the Native Americans have to convert to Christianity. Force them to, because if they don't, they'll be killed, basically. They have to convert to Christianity and submit to Spanish authority. That's it. That's the deal. It turns out, though, that in Madrid, Ferdinand and Isabella in Madrid, they are concerned about the treatment of the Native Americans that Christopher Columbus brought back for show after his first voyage. Are they not human beings? Are you not obliged to love them as you love yourselves? These are human beings. The Pope forbade the enslavement of Native Americans. You shouldn't do that. You should not do that. But the people on the ground in South America have a different perspective. Even if they converted to Christianity, the Indians, because they had to, hundreds of thousands that did, the Native Americans were still forced into harsh labor camps. So it's basically like slavery. There was money to be made, labor was needed. So it was totally cynical treatment of other human beings. We've seen this before. Slavery. Because the land routes so remember the spice trade? So after the Muslims took over, it got more difficult because the Muslims were controlling it and saying, well, if you want to come through, you got to pay some hefty taxes and so forth. So the Portuguese in particular started trade routes around Africa to get to the Far East. So there were little ports and fortifications along Africa.
Need to change everything in here. It smells really bad in this room.
I put the seeds.
Sorry.
The seeds that I bought yesterday.
I didn't know you bought any seeds yesterday. I'm sorry.
Shower, didn't you?
Did you hide them from me because you thought I might steal your seeds?
It's like, that's what happened.
Here's the basic economics fact.
Put them in a stupid place, yes.
Oh, Lord. Remember Gerald just kept clicking X's last week.
No.
Oh, no.
Here's the basic fundamental economic rules. Is that the demand for labor, because so they thought, did we get to find spices and stuff? No, they weren't spices, but there's gold. There's also sugar cane, highly lucrative product, but very labor intensive. And then there aren't enough Indians to satisfy the demand for labor. So who steps in? The middleman steps in, so like, okay, there's a demand for labor here. There's not enough labor in South America on the land. That's cheap labor. I gotta transport them right there. But there are slaves to be had. Tens of thousands, and it's more than that every time. Tens of thousands are being imported by 1533 already to South America. And although some clergy protested the slavery of Africans, the church did not prohibit the practice, the Catholic Church, and though it did require baptism and allowed slaves to attend mass. The abolition of slavery did not occur until the wars of independence in the early 19th century. Simon Bolivar and those folks. Brazil, by far the largest importer of African slaves in the New World, did not abolish slavery until 1888. Amazingly. That's the story there. So not a whole lot. Well, some about Christianity, I guess. And then North America, so something we probably all know. So New Spain was also in North America, actually. That's why we have. They have a huge amount of land. Remember, from Florida all the way to California, all the west, basically. On the East Coast, it was a competition. The British, Dutch, French were all trying to claim that land. The British colonies and later the United States will attract and create a plethora of Protestant denominations as the Scots and Scots-Irish are invited in. I didn't talk about Methodism, but Methodist, Baptist, Anabaptist. I discussed it before and why so many denominations, but Protestantism tends to split, as you know. Yeah, I'm just throwing this in here, just so you know some of the religious foundations in America for the white colonists, Virginia Anglican, Massachusetts Puritan, so New York originally Dutch Reformed because New Amsterdam, Maryland, Lord Baltimore was Catholic. That was a safe haven for Catholics in a Protestant world. And Delaware Lutheran, originally Carolina Anglican. Lots of Scots-Irish came into Pennsylvania down into North Carolina, and Pennsylvania Quakers originally. Okay, what about the Indians, the indigenous people? Relations between Native Americans and European Christian colonists in what is now the United States was not always cordial. And this is an example of an understatement. It basically, I think you could view from the Pilgrims, or in Jamestown to the 20th century as a continuous Indian war, basically, and what happened? Why? Because we wanted their land. They said, well, conflict over land rights led to wars and enslavement. It wasn't enslavement early, enslavement of the Indians. Missionaries sought to convert with little mixed success in the US. They did establish American Indian boarding schools, often an extension of a missionary. They were established starting in the mid-17th century with a view to, so the idea was that, well, finding the adults, we can't say, what about the children? We'll take the children, we'll put them into schools, church schools, basically, and we'll make them into English type Americans. So give them a haircut, give them a uniform, they have to not practice any of their culture, and they'll get a Christian education. So basically forced Christianity. And there's a before and after. Before on the left, these are actually, that's Wounded Yellow Robe, Henry Standing Bear, and Chauncey Yellow Robe before, and then 3 years later, all dressed up and. And this is the most famous student from the Carlisle, Pennsylvania Indian Industrial School. Jim Thorpe. There he is. He was also into. That was one of the most famous of the Indian schools, so-called Indian schools. Spread of Christianity with America's slavery. Huge topic, just one slide. again, just like in South America, economic success was based on agriculture, tobacco, rice, indigo, and then of course cotton later on. Much labor was needed. Importing slaves from Africa started in 1619. That's the ship that came up that had Africans on board as captured, and they were sold to the colonists in Jamestown. The colonists didn't really know what to do with them at first, and they were technically indentured servants, but the idea quickly got on that maybe this is a solution to our problem. But so there were no laws addressing slavery at that time. And from England, there was the widespread principle that Christians were prohibited from holding fellow Christians as slaves. So if they're baptized, then can we have them as slaves? Then in 1667, Virginia passed a law declaring that baptism, declaring conversion to Christianity, did not change the status of a person from slave to free. So the rules changed because of economic demand, I would say, or economic necessity. You know the rest of the story. One thing I do have this actually, this is sort of coming out of nowhere, but it's a great topic regarding slavery in the United States. So our church, leading to the Civil War, our church, the Southern Presbyterians broke away from the Northern Presbyterian Church. I all know that. And this is a remarkable document. This is when the Southern Presbyterians did, they had a General Assembly December 1861. And they say that the reason we're no longer in communion with the Northern Presbyterian Church is because they got political. Because they had written, Northern churches, that Abraham Lincoln was okay with them. And so this statement says that we Southern Presbyterians will have nothing to do with politics whatsoever. They did it, and we just can't abide by that because it's not political. But then it goes on to defend slavery later on in this document. So it's pretty amazing how politics, economics influence your thinking regarding religion. Okay, well, to the 18th century. Okay, missionaries, and I wanted to spend a lot of time on this. Actually, that's my first intent, but I didn't because I just ran out of time. It is so interesting to me, the missionary movements. And the general view is that, your missionaries are just like an arm of the colonial expansion, but I think it was more than that. The colonies government originally supported missionaries in an attempt to convert the subject people to Christianity as a civilizing force. Because save souls encourage passivity. So if we get them to be Christian, they'll listen to us, we don't have to worry about fighting them anymore. But the missionaries developed independent societies that were not directly controlled by governments, not directly controlled by independent churches. They were church related and church supported, but they were independent. So societies were voluntary, not direct extensions of churches. The mission was to save souls and alleviate suffering. Examples, in 1792, the Particular Baptist Society for propagating the gospel among the heathen. They changed the name later. Anyway, Methodist Presbyterians and congregations founded the London Missionary Society, which is very famous. That's a society that sponsored David Livingstone in Africa, and so forth. So these societies were very. I wanted to spend more time on that, but I didn't. I think that's a great topic for a future, if you're interested. Talk about the missionary movement. But later, European and US governments adopted a neutral, even hostile stance towards missionaries because of their independence. It's like, we're not exactly doing what we want you to do, missionaries, in terms of extending our colonial control. You're fostering, promoting independence, and we don't like that. Okay, in Africa, European power took control of Islamic North America in the 19th century. Hard to convert the Muslims. There were Coptic Christians in Egypt in there since day one. And then early 20th century, the European powers divided all of sub-Saharan Africa into colonies, as you probably know, and then missionaries followed the colonization. There were Christian churches in every colony, both in the cities and many remote villages by 1914. great success in converting sub-Saharan Africa to Christianity. By 2022, there's 700 million Christians in Africa. Isn't that an extraordinary number? For the colonies, famously in after World War One, the French got French West Africa, the British and the South Africa, and so forth. It's all divided up into. And why are they doing there? Are they there to promote Christianity, or are there other reasons why the governments were there? Were the resources exploited, for example? And then here's the dominant religion in the North of Africa, Saharan is Islam, as it is today, and in sub-Saharan Christianity is the predominant religion. I just sort of, Dr. Livingston, it's a whole other story about Dr. Livingston and what an amazing fellow he was.
Yeah.
Okay, Asia, big place. It's sort of closer to the Middle East. Armenia adopted Christianity in 301, Georgia, the country shortly thereafter. So, and Christianity followed the trade routes from Europe to the Indian subcontinent as the Europeans were looking for spices and other things to trade. Europeans established colonies. British were in India, famously, French and Indochina, Vietnam, Philippines, Spanish. Both Catholic and Protestant ministries had some success. South Korea would be an example of great success, but not everywhere. Foreign intervention was resented as nationalism developed in Asia. Boxer Rebellion in the 19th century. The communist national success in China, North Korea, and Vietnam following World War II. So obviously the communist regimes are not supportive of Christianity, or at least were not at the beginning. So Christianity is about 13% of the total population. That includes Russia, so much smaller percentage than in Africa. Oh, already to summary. You're probably delighted to hear that. 1500, the Catholic Church is reforming. Isn't it? It was so clear. Challenges to papal authority are made. We talked about. Started the Reformation. Started the Reformation in 1517. Religious wars, ugly, dividing into Europe into Catholic and Protestant as it is today. South America, Catholic because of Spain and Portugal. Indigenous populations and Africans exploited. North America becomes primarily Protestant. Indigenous populations, Africans exploited. Christianity is exposed to Africa and Asia. Christianity is the largest religion in the world for now. So Christianity, where are we now? Christianity is the largest, I said this at the very beginning of this series. Christianity is the largest religion in the world, 2.4 billion adherents. Islam has 1.9. Not that it's a contest. Non-religious, atheists are 1.2 billion. I don't know if we call them adherents or not, but it's pretty large, isn't it? Christianity is the dominant religion in Europe with South America, Australasia, and the largest religion in Africa. Does size matter? I don't know. The future of Christianity? I don't know. According to Pew Research Center, by 2050, the number of Muslims will equal the number of Christians. That's not too far from now. Does that matter? I don't know. Atheists, though increasing in the United States, will make up a declining share of the world's population. Interesting. Muslims in Europe make up 10% of the population. Christians will decline from more than 3/4 in the US to 2/3 by 2050. Interesting. 40% of Christians will live in sub-Saharan Africa. I think Africa is the place to understand better. I mean, it's like, I forget what I said in terms of the population growth. In the world, by far the greatest population growth is in sub-Saharan Africa, now to 2050. So closing thought, you can join in this. Well, you can't change history, that's for sure. So I don't know why we're doing this, but to me, it's like ancestry.com. It can't change who I am, but it helps explain how I got here. Some takeaways, I think, the extraordinary the conversion process of the apostles, that is magical. That is a miracle. Paul and the pagans, why? Paul, just an extraordinary person. The growth of Christianity in the Roman Empire, and the part two, I think a big story there is the collapse of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Roman Catholic Church becomes the church in Europe until it's challenged by the Reformation, part three. The seeming necessity for the Reformation. The Reformation had to happen, it seems to me. I say that on St. Patrick's Day. Troy. And the global growth of Christianity by force, by gunpoint, and by choice. Choice is better. I think that's it. Yeah. So I don't know. I wanted to spend more time on part three, but I just ran out of time. But anyway, what time is it? Okay, so it's not. I think there's a lot of things that could be further talked about, I think, from this. This is all incredibly superficial, obviously. But, any thoughts you all have about?
This was so interesting.
Yeah, that's good.
I wish I'd seen the first, but the last three. Me too. Amazing. So
Oh.
fascinating. Thank you.
Pictures of colored maps.
Yeah,
I'd love to have all those maps.
Well, they're available on the,
Ren
online,
Valley.
yeah, that's right. Please copy the images down.
Maybe Gerald can help.
Yeah, Bill,
You used the word Coptic, like a common adjective. What's that mean?
Coptic Christianity, oh boy, so this is where, you're gonna challenge me on the superficiality of my knowledge. Coptic Christians, so that's an old form of Christianity called Oriental Christianity in Egypt, so they kind of bypassed a lot of the changes that took place in the Roman, and the other Catholic churches. We're not participating in some of the doctrines that were established. That's all I can say. I mean, it's totally inadequate, but I don't have much for that. Sorry. I do have some indulgences, however, but. Everybody's interested. $5 each, $3 to $10, guaranteed success. It's not purgatory. Any other thoughts? Yeah, so,
I'm just curious a little bit about the Orthodox Church.
East Orthodox Church.
East and North Orthodox Church, and I know each country has their own,
Yeah,
Armenian Orthodox, Georgian Orthodox,
Russian
Russian
Orthodox,
Orthodox, Greek Orthodox.
yes.
Do you know?
Don't know enough about that to be of any real help. What is interesting too, is also like, remember Bosnia, Muslim, that was because the Ottoman Empire went up through the Balkans, up to the gates of Vienna. And then, retreated, were eventually defeated by pockets of that remains, so I'm not answering your question, but, I don't really know enough.
I was just wondering, a lot of the difference between, I know they have a patriarch who's
Yeah,
more or less like a pope.
yeah,
But, the difference in the beliefs between
yeah.
Protestantism,
Yeah,
Catholicism.
one thing I can say is that was one of the issues between the Eastern Orthodox Church headquartered in Constantinople and the Greek-based, and the Western Church in Rome, because Rome eventually developed so that the Pope became the spokesperson, the authority for the church. And the Eastern Church never had that. They never thought that one bishop, that's what the Pope is, the bishop of Rome, that one bishop should have say for all the other bishops. So it was to not have the kind of hierarchy, and that's about all I know. Yeah, no.
Hey, Bill, it strikes me, it's not a long time session I've seen, but I appreciate the review earlier. That if you think about it, kind of one of two directions all this heads into. One is one of cynicism,
Yeah,
which is religion just been used for power and control over the years.
yes,
And then the other, so that would support the non-believers, that growing percentage.
yes,
And then the other view is the people we don't talk about, that's how you started.
yes, yes,
Which is despite all this,
yes.
despite all this,
Despite all
look
this,
at all of the good and the love that's been
yes.
injected, so.
Well, no, thank you for saying that, because that's a perfect
That's a
wrap up.
summary.
Huh?
That's a great summary.
It's a great summary, because because, as I mentioned, if you look at the history, they're writing about the big events. And it's about power and money and control largely, but the strength of Christianity is not in that, I don't think. It's more in something that is under the surface. It is that love and caring for people that doesn't get the headlines, but it's there. And to me, that's,
How else
oh,
would it have survived?
yeah, there was so it's like, this is from the first session. Paul Johnson, who's a theologian. He says about, when I was questioning, why did pagans convert to Christianity? What's in it for me? But he says it was the Christian spirit of mutual love and communal charity which most impressed pagans. So it's that love element to it that actually got people saying, I think this is something I believe in my heart, because we're all humans, we're all kind of like torn, we have this love aspect of this, and we have this, money or whatever, kind of don't we? But you're right, but right, it's just it's not in the history books very much, but it's there. And I think it's the other thing that really describes it, or really, distinguishes or, has created this tremendous, demand, this tremendous interest in Christianity, created Christianity. Why do it? What's in it for me? You said better than I did, actually. You can do this. Yeah.
That kind
Thank you.
of, that reminds me of, many of you all read the book, The Life of Pi, and I, used to teach that book, and one thing that's always stood out for me is that, Pi, was just interested in learning more about all the religions, and there was Christianity, there was Buddhism, Hinduism, and
I think last summer.
yeah, and there were things that he liked about each one, but the thing that he liked about Christianity was stories.
Yeah.
Like from the Bible,
Yeah.
all the parables and all that stuff.
But, yeah, one thing too, I thought, I just made me think about this is what I wanted to do and did not do is spend more time with missionaries. I'm very interested in the missionaries. So we had Lewis Sutton, I was just in awe that he would go to Africa. And I knew a missionary family in my hometown that go to Africa every summer, and he was a doctor as well. To take that kind of risk and go for the purpose of converting, the purpose of trying to extend the love, compassion of Christianity, people, and help them. A lot of them, not as instruments of the government, although some were, I think, earlier, but to me, that's really interesting to do that, and Paul, to go out and just convert the pagans, how brave that is to do that. Who's gonna do that? Who's gonna do that? I think to me, that's an element that somebody should do some element about that, about the underlying strength of Christianity and the love aspect of it.
I nominate you, Bill.